and welcome to the ballot proposal presentation hosted by the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. My name is Angela Ryan, and I am the president of the Northwest Wayne County League. We thank the City of Redford for allowing us to use their facility for this public education event. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not support or oppose any candidate running for any office. The League does take positions on issues after careful study, so you may see our name attached to an issue that we are advocating for or opposing. Membership in the League is open to all citizens who are at least 16 years old, so if you're interested in joining this public service organization, please let us know. Membership applications are available here tonight. They look like this. They're over on the table. And also on our website, which is www.lwvnorthwestwayne.org. The League's main mission is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. One of the ways we do that is by having public presentations such as this one tonight. The League also prepares a nonpartisan voter guide before each election. The current guide is now available online at www.vote411.org. By typing in your voting address, you can view the races on your primary ballot, the candidates' responses to questions posed by the League, and information about these ballot proposals. You can also find the link to the voter guide on our website, lwvnorthwestwayne.org. And so you don't have to just memorize these websites I'm giving you. We've got a bookmark over on the table, and they're all on the back of the bookmark. So please pick one up on your way out. Print copies of the voter guides will be available in the public libraries in the first week of October. If you're not registered to vote, you can do so by visiting your local clerk's office or by going to www.michigan.gov/SOS, also on the back of the bookmark. Complete the registration form and mail it to the appropriate clerk. You must do so by October 9th, and I believe if it's mailed, it just has to be postmarked by October 9th. Election day is November 6th, and the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you vote in person, you will be asked for a picture ID, but if you do not have a picture ID or don't have it with you, you can still vote by signing an affidavit of identity. If you qualify for an absentee ballot, they are available from your clerk's offices now. We urge you all to be participants in our democracy by making educated choices in the November election. This event is being videotaped, and it will be available for viewing on our website within a week. At this time, I will introduce our presenter, League member Megan Chenoweth. All right, Megan.
Thanks, Angela. Good evening, everybody. My name is Megan Chenoweth.
Talk louder.
Good evening. My name is Megan Chenoweth. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. And I am here to talk to you a little bit this evening about the 3 ballot proposals, statewide ballot proposals that you'll be voting on in November. I'll be giving you an overview of what the proposals are and presenting some of the pros and cons of each. So before we begin, I want to give you a little bit of an understanding about what you can expect to hear tonight. We will be talking through the language of the ballot, the details behind the ballot proposals, and we'll be going through the pros and cons as presented by the supporters and the opponents of those measures. I do want to just let you know that the statements that we are presenting as pros and cons, these are not the League's statements. We're not responsible for the facts behind them or the facts of those groups. So we're here to present all sides of the measures so that you can make your own informed decision. All right, so on your ballot, you're going to see 3 proposals placed on the ballot through citizen petitions, one of which is a voter-initiated law, and 2 of which are constitutional amendments. I'm going to just go ahead and flip some things through. Whether a voter-initiated law or a constitutional amendment, they still require only a simple majority to approve them. The law, a voter-initiated law, will take effect if passed 10 days after the vote is declared, and the amendment will become part of the Constitution if it's passed, if they are passed, 45 days after the date of the election. So the difference between the voter-initiated law and a constitutional amendment is important in the effect that passing them has later, and it has to do with what are the options for undoing them. For the constitutional amendments, the legislature is not capable of undoing those. The the constitutional amendments, if passed by the simple majority of the voters, become part of the Constitution of the state of Michigan, and that's the end of the story. They can't be changed again unless they are placed on the ballot again. The voter-initiated law, on the other hand, there is a legislative option to counteract that, to undo that. If 3/4 of each house votes to repeal that, it can be undone. It can be overridden. All right. So you will see 3 ballot proposals statewide on your ballot in November. Proposal 18-1 is the Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol petition. That's the voter-initiated law. Proposal 18-2 is the Voters Not Politicians petition. That's a constitutional amendment. And 18-3 is called the Promote the Vote petition. That's also a constitutional amendment. So, I'm going to begin with Proposal 18-1. This is a proposed initiative law to authorize and legalize possession, use, and cultivation of marijuana products by individuals who are at least 21 years of age and older, and commercial sales of marijuana through state licensed dealers. So, the language that you see in the PowerPoint right now is the language that will appear on the ballot. You'll be voting, should this proposal be adopted, yes or no. Rather than read you all of the details of that, I'm going to move ahead, talk through some of the details. If you would like to have a copy of the language with you, there is a handout by the door so that you can take that with you. You can make notes, whatever you need. All right. So what does this proposal actually do? So this voter-initiated law would establish the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. And that would do basically 5 things. First, it would legalize the recreational use of marijuana in the state of Michigan. Now, when we say that it legalizes the recreational use of marijuana, there are some restrictions on that. It's restricted to at ages 21 and over, as we saw. It encompasses marijuana and marijuana-infused edibles. It imposes a limit on how much marijuana you can have in your home. That is 10 ounces. If you have more than 2.5 ounces in your home, you have to keep the surplus securely locked. It also imposes a limit for how much you can possess, how much you can have on your person in public. And that's a 2.5 ounce limit for possession. And there are additional restrictions as well. According to the language of the law, you can possess marijuana on your person, but you cannot consume it in public. You cannot consume it while you're driving. You cannot drive under the influence of marijuana, things like that. Second, the proposed law would legalize the cultivation and sale of marijuana for recreational purposes. There are different limits imposed for personal and business cultivation. Personal cultivation, you can grow up to 12 plants in your house for your own use. Business cultivation, there is a system of different licenses that the law defines that, and each license type corresponds to a different number of plants. So the idea is you can have a small marijuana growing business that's called a micro grower and is licensed as a micro grower that has a limit of 100 plants. There's also a much larger license for a Class C license is, I believe, the largest, and that's up to 2,000 plants. So the idea is different types of businesses are limited and regulated in different ways. There are a limit of the number of licenses that any individual person can apply for at any given time. So through, I believe, 2023, there's a limit of 5 licenses per person. So if someone wanted to establish 5 businesses in 5 different locations, they can apply to do so. And there are additional types of licenses imposed as well to kind of support the overall infrastructure that it takes to run these businesses. There are licenses for processors, there are licenses for testing facilities, secure transporters, things like that. The law also permits taxing revenue from commercial marijuana facilities. And it imposes a 10% excise tax on sale of marijuana, in addition to the 6% sales tax that spans lots of different items that for sale in Michigan. Estimates of how much money we're actually talking about here vary. Estimates from low ends is something like $48 million. That's what the opponents estimate. Supporters have an estimate that runs into the hundreds of millions. The law also specifies administration. Excuse me, before I get into that, let me back up one more minute and say one more thing about the money behind this, and that is I wanted to talk just a little bit about how the excise tax itself would be spent. The law does lay out exactly where the money that we raise, that would be raised from this measure would be spent. First, it goes to pay for the costs of the regulation. And then what's left over, 35% goes to the state school aid fund for that, and that's K-12 public education. 35% goes to the Michigan Transportation Fund, that's repair and maintenance of roads and bridges. 15% goes to municipal governments and in locations where a marijuana business is located. 15% goes to counties where a marijuana business is located. Okay. And lastly, the law does have some language about creating administrative rules, for example, granting local communities the right and a system for limiting what types of businesses they're going to have in their community. And it also also talks about penalties that can be imposed as well for violations of the law.
What did you say again was the estimate for the income based on the taxes?
It ranges from 48 million on the low end to hundreds of millions on the high end. I always like to put budget numbers in a little bit of context as well. So the number I like to kind of keep in mind is the overall state of Michigan budget, which I think in 2017 was $55 billion. So that kind of gives you a sense for, are we talking pennies or dollars, right? We have this included just to kind of show you, put Michigan's effort to legalize recreational marijuana in context. There are a number of other states shown here in green that have already taken the initiative to legalize recreational marijuana. There are a number of states as well, including Michigan, that have legalized marijuana for medical purposes. That's been legal in Michigan since 2008. And it is probably worth calling out at this point that this is having no effect on federal law, right? Marijuana, recreational use of marijuana period, remains illegal at the federal level. All right. Okay, so supporters of this measure say that this is a sensible alternative to Michigan's failed policy of marijuana prohibition. And I just want to remind you, this is our first supporters and opponents say slide. These again are the words of the supporters and opponents themselves, not the league. So they say this positions Michigan as a national leader in the adoption of smart adult use marijuana laws. That it creates a state-regulated licensed marijuana businesses, and that's an excise tax on marijuana at the retail level, in addition to the standard state sales tax. The main supporter behind this measure is a group called the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana and Alcohol. This is their website where you can get a lot more detail about their positions. There are a number of organizations that have thrown their support behind this measure. Opponents say, beginning, that legalized recreational marijuana is bad for Michigan, that the recreational marijuana industry targets our youth, makes for dangerous drivers, that today's marijuana is not marijuana your parents used. I invite that person to meet my parents that recreational marijuana activity increases criminal activity, that there are better alternatives, and that recreational marijuana is not good for our economy. The opponent, the organized opposition behind this is an organization called Healthy and Productive Michigan. This is their website if you want to go check them out and hear more about what they have to say. And there are a number of additional organizations that have cropped up in opposition to this measure. In addition to the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, which is not cropped up specifically to oppose marijuana. All right, so at this point, I wanted to ask, are there any questions about this measure? I will do my best.
So clinical trials are listed here. What clinical trials are we talking about? Clinical trials pertaining to marijuana use or clinical trials for cancer or anything like that? It's on this paper, it wasn't up there.
Okay, can you read me what you...
Yeah, I've heard that retail sales of marijuana and animals subject to 10% tax dedicated to implementation costs.
I know what you're saying.
Clinical trials, schools, roads, and municipalities.
Okay, yep. You caught the one detail I skipped over in the funding piece. So to go back to where the money from the excise tax goes. Like I said, the first thing that comes off the top is the amount of money that it takes to support the regulation infrastructure behind this law. The next thing that comes off the top is that for the first 2 years, a certain portion of that income is set aside for FDA-approved studies on the effects of medicinal marijuana treating conditions such as PTSD in U.S. Army veterans or U.S. military veterans. So that's the clinical trials that I'm referring to. 2 years, some of the money is going that way. After that, it goes out. It goes to the other percentages that I'm talking about. I saw you next.
Yes, I have a few questions actually.
Okay.
You said that 12 plants could be in your house, or grown or in your house. And does that mean 12 plants total or 12 plants per individual or adult?
So the question is
Because some of that is within the medical marijuana too. Like how many, for example, in medical marijuana, there can be a caregiver can have 5 patients. Each patient, you can grow 12 plants for each patient. So but in that one, it doesn't seem to be any limit about how many caregivers in the house. And I'm wondering if that's in this.
I don't remember seeing anything in the research materials that I looked at. I would have to go back to the regulatemi.org website and look for details on that. I only know, 12 plants for personal use was all I saw. Do you mind if I saw one other person had a
sure,
question,
go ahead.
and if I can come back and take one more of yours, I will do that. Deanna, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
I'll hold to one.
We'll bounce it around.
Two. So the question is, how will they, is there a validated test for driving under the influence? And how will that be determined? Because there are legal limits for alcohol. Is there the same kind of thing for marijuana? I mean, you're not going to take a hair sample and see if somebody smoked or whatever for 30 days. So is there a validated test for that yet?
That is a great question. There are not.
So that
so that is,
determine
yes,
this.
that is a challenge, that is an enforcement challenge to be reckoned with when it comes to driving under the influence. Okay,
And
one
then
other question.
any of these things that are not known at this time or would be determined by the legislature then? The legislature would have to would have to set up the parameters? Like for, she's saying for levels of marijuana use in driving and so forth. Would that be responsibility of the legislature?
Well, I think, so the question is basically, once we have established some scientific test for this is how you measure how much marijuana someone has consumed. Yes, I think that's a fair guess, is that there would then be some legal work to do to define, is there any acceptable amount of marijuana, similar to the yeah, Marie.
I'm reading the verbiage here, the actual law. No more than 12 marijuana plants for personal use, provided that no more than 12 marijuana plants are possessed, cultivated, or processed on the premises at once. So it's 10 per
On the
month.
premises.
Thank you. On the premises, yeah.
Not individual?
Right.
Because, okay, then that's different than the medical marijuana.
Thank you, I'm glad that you could go back to that. Yeah, I am gonna take, I'm keeping my eye on the time to make sure that I will take one more question, then I'm gonna go.
As a former school teacher, did anybody discuss or have you heard anything that irony of giving money to the schools with the marijuana? Like, to me, that is just, I know that, but I understand that, so that is another thing that could be.
Alcohol
But with-
tax too.
Yeah.
Alcohol tax too.
I
Okay,
can,
I guess I'm learning,
I can certainly see, I can certainly see how you could appreciate some irony in, good money coming from what some people would perceive as, vice sources, alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana. I also think that, the reason the allocation goes this way is that these are the big funding gaps, right? Schools, roads, counties, cities, that's where the desperate need for money is.
Could I just ask one more?
Quick
one.
Okay.
Would now, some of the money, the funds would be used for regulation. Do you think that would be state, local, or county, or a combination?
Like, as in, who would
The
receive
oversight, the regulation.
That's a good question. The infrastructure is all, kind of defined at, the rules are defined at the state level. I don't feel like I have enough information to really be able to weigh in on
I think it's important.
exactly where, who would ultimately come down to having that responsibility. All right. I feel bad.
No, I was thinking it's ironic, too, same thing, about
Okay.
giving money to the federal government, even though it's illegal federally, but it's.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. I'm going to go on to the next measure then, which is Proposal 18-2. Proposal 18-2 is a proposed constitutional amendment, so we're changing the Michigan State Constitution here, to establish a commission of citizens with exclusive authority to adopt district boundaries for the Michigan Senate, the Michigan House of Representatives, and the U.S. Congress every 10 years. I should have put the full language up here, which again, I am not going to go in, I'm not going to laboriously read through for you. You do have the wording. And instead, I'm going to jump straight ahead to a more in-depth discussion of what this proposal does. Okay, so a little background to make sure everybody's on the same page. Every 10 years, we do the census across the entire United States. It measures how population shifts throughout the country. There is a requirement that Voters are represented in equal numbers across districts, and that those numbers change as a result of what we learn about where the population is. So each state redraws its district lines in response to the new information it gets from the census. In Michigan, that process of drawing district lines, redistricting process, is performed by the legislature. Michigan's politicians have taken advantage of this power and drawn districts to choose their voters for their political advantage. So this measure then, what this would do is establish a Citizens Redistricting Commission to take care of redistricting instead. So the Citizens Redistricting Commission would consist of 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents with representation from across the state. It would ban politicians, consultants, and lobbyists from serving on the commission. It would introduce a new process for drawing maps. The Citizens Redistricting Commission would have to meet in public. The proposed maps and the methodology and data that was used to draw those maps would have to be submitted as public reports. Everything down to variables used by the computers to draw the maps is available to the public. And then lastly, it imposes some rules for how the final maps will be chosen. So like we said, the commission is made up of 4 people who self-identify as Democrats, 4 who self-identify as Republicans, 5 who self-identify as independents. A minimum of 2 of those Democrats, 2 of those Republicans, and 2 of the independents on the commission have to approve the final map. The idea there is that it prevents one political party from controlling the process. So there's a lot of detail going on in this proposal, but I just want to touch on a few of the things that it specifies. First is it specifies how you go about applying for membership on the commission. Briefly, half of the applicant pool comes from people who decide to apply, and half of the applicant pool comes from the Secretary of State randomly choosing registered voters from across the state and sending them applications and hoping that until they get the number of applicants that they need to be applicant. The measure specifies how members are to be selected. The Secretary of State uses statistical sampling basically to pick an overall pool of 60 Democrats, 60 Republicans, and 80 independents to choose from. The legislature and the parties have some options to strike a few people, and then from the 180 people who are left after that process, we choose them at random. The Secretary of State chooses them at random. The proposal contains processes and timetables about holding public hearings and meetings. They are required to hold 10 public hearings across the state to receive feedback online on the maps that they have proposed. It specifies the criteria for determining districts, and these are spelled out very specifically. And I feel like they are, they're interesting, so they're kind of worth touching on. First and foremost, we have to comply with the law. They have to have equal, the districts have to have equal population and comply with the Voting Rights Act. They have to be geographically contiguous. They have to reflect the state's diversity and communities of interest. That could be neighborhoods, keeping neighborhoods together, for example. They cannot give a disproportionate advantage to any political party. They cannot favor or disfavor an incumbent. They must, when possible, reflect county, city, and township boundaries, and they must be compact. Right? No more of this in your district in your district. Let's see. It also specifies how you go about adopting redistricting plans. After the Citizens Redistricting Commission members come up with their proposed maps, there is 45 days for public comment, a minimum of 5 public hearings, and the commission votes to finalize maps. There is a mechanism in place for challenging. The challenges go before the Michigan Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court finds the maps unconstitutional, the commission has to redraw them in a way that that addresses that unconstitutionality concern. Not mentioned here is, but probably worth touching on is the question of money, right? How much does this cost? Each commissioner, a position on the Citizens Redistricting Commission is paid. Each commissioner is paid 1/4 of the governor's salary. This year, the governor's salary is 180 something. Anyway, the estimate that I saw was about $40,000 a year per year that the commission is operating. Normally, you would expect the commission to operate over about 2 years, right? You get citizens, you get census data, you have the maps ready for the next major election, but conceivably it could go on longer if there were, say, a court challenge to a map, right? So $40,000 a year per year that the commission is operating. There is also an overall budget for the Citizens Redistricting Commission at large. They're guaranteed a minimum of 1/4 of the Secretary of State's budget. The Secretary of State's budget this year, or the year that I have information on, most recently was $18.5 million. There's a ton of great detail around this proposal. There's a great article in Bridge Magazine about here's how Michigan's redistricting commission would work, if you want to get down into the great details. And actually, I believe we do have a representative. We do have, I apologize, I do not know your first name, but we do have a member of Voters Not Politicians here who is.
And I am too.
Okay, great. And I believe we have a second presentation planned after this, is that right?
Right.
Okay.
After your pro and con is over, we'll take a break and
Okay,
go come on.
okay. Sorry, I know the ballot measures, but logistics. All right, so the supporters for this measure, sorry, say that voters should choose their politicians, not the other way around. And that allowing politicians to draw their own districts is a conflict of interest, that it puts the thoughts in charge of the hen house. When politicians have the power to draw voting maps, they have the power to handpick their voters. And that is from votersnotpoliticians.com. Voters Not Politicians is the organization that supports this measure. The organizers behind this measure. And as you can see, a large number of organizations have endorsed it. So the opponents say that the proposed redistricting ballot proposal would drastically rewrite Michigan's constitution. It would change the basic foundation of state governing structure. It would remove the voice of the governor, legislature, and courts in the redistricting process. That it would replace those 3 branches of government with a randomly drawn 13-member commission that would be unelected and unaccountable. The quotes that you see here come from the Executive Vice President of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. The second one, the ballot proposal would also place an inordinate amount of power in the hands of a partisan Secretary of State, thus favoring one political party over the other and generating divisive partisanship, public discontent, and distrust of the electoral process. The opposition comes from an organization called Protect My Vote, which is the last time we put this when we were selling this, it did not have a website to share with you. And opposition also comes from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce and the Michigan Republican Party. Before I take questions about this one, I am just going to, so the League of Women Voters of Michigan has raised a lawsuit about gerrymandering, related to gerrymandering. So the League's lawsuit is going to trial in February of 2019, and it challenges the constitutionality of the districts that were drawn in 2011. So if this lawsuit is successful, we would need to have new districts in place for the 2020 election. The Citizens Redistricting Commission, however, if enacted into law, would require the state of Michigan to take lots of steps to set up the Citizens Redistricting Commission, whose work would begin in 2021 after the next census. So the reason we like to kind of mention this is each of these actions potentially affects the way districts are drawn, but at a different time and under different circumstances. Both the lawsuit and proposal 2 would affect district lines for Congress and the state's House. Okay, I'm gonna wind up my discussion of proposal 2 there and ask if you have any questions. Yes?
Can you go back one slide to where the opposition was indicating, here we go. The ballot, second paragraph, the ballot proposal would place an inordinate amount of power in the hands of a partisan Secretary of State. Do you know why they're saying that? Are they saying because they would randomly select the members of the commission? So random selection gives you power?
Yeah, I think that yes. So if I were to put myself in the shoes of an opponent here, I would probably make the argument that what is once a process that was performed under the authority of elected leaders is now becoming will now be performed by a single person's office, a single part of the executive branch, because they are in charge of that process of sending applications out to certain
So does that mean the person who pulls the bingo balls for the lottery has power?
Makes all the difference in the world in this.
Because they can oppose it, maybe because they can oppose the maps that are drawn, right? Doesn't the Secretary of State have the ability to oppose the maps that are drawn? And then they have to come up with another one?
They don't have the authority to say, no, go ahead, you have to redraw that. I suppose they could be part of a lawsuit that went before the Michigan Supreme Court, but I think in theory, I think you could have a lot of organizations bringing that same lawsuit. So I don't think that in particular is what gives them the authority. I do think it is that, being responsible for overseeing that selection process. Yes?
Just a point on their first objection, removing the voice of the legislature in the redistricting process. But that's the problem.
Well, it does in fact remove the voice of the legislature in this process. Yes, that is a true statement. All right, are there any other questions about this? I'm going to jump ahead back to where we were. We're going to talk about the last of the 3 measures that will appear under ballot, which is proposal 3. Putting the whole language up on the screen for you right now. Proposal 3 is a proposal to authorize automatic and election day voter registration, no reason absentee voting, and straight ticket voting, and add current legal requirements for military, overseas voting, and post-election audits to the Michigan Constitution. There are a number of different voting-related constitutional changes encompassed in this measure. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what this proposal does. So, like I said, several different voting-related measures all going on in the same initiative. And the very first is it protects the right to vote a secret ballot. Not to say that we do not have the right to a secret ballot. Let me rephrase that. 39 states currently have language in their constitutions that says that says our people in this state have a right to a secret ballot. In Michigan, we do not currently have that language, so it is left to the legislature, which means in theory, it could vote, it could change without voting. Second, it ensures that military members and overseas voters receive an absentee ballot at least 45 days before the election. That ensures that it can be delivered so that it returns in time, so that it can be returned in time. The idea is that it is demonstrating some commitment to military members and to overseas voters to ensure that it's in that it's in the Michigan Constitution. It is currently part of federal and state law. Third, it provides voters with the option to vote straight party. Michigan had straight party voting in partisan elections for 127 years. There is a federal lawsuit launched in 2016 that bans straight party ticket voting. There had been a stay on that law going into effect, but that stay was removed in September. So there is no straight ticket voting in November. This measure, if passed, would put straight ticket voting in the Constitution. And like we said at the beginning of the discussion, the only way to change what is in the Constitution is to bring a ballot measure before the people, so the legislature could not make any changes from it. Fourth, it would automatically register citizens to vote at the Secretary of State's office unless the citizen opts out of that. 14 states and the District of Columbia currently have this. Right now, you have the ability to opt into voter registration when you do business with the Secretary of State, but this would change that model to an opt-out. The next measure is it would allow a citizen to register to vote anytime with proof of residence, which is to say register to vote anytime up to and including the day of an election. So currently, Michigan allows you to register to vote. Let me make sure I have all of my numbers right. Currently, Michigan allows you to register to vote either in person or by mail up to 30 days before the election. With this measure, you would be allowed to register to vote by mail up to 15 days before election. There are about 38 states that require longer than Michigan does now. It would also allow you to vote in person register to vote in person during those last 14 days before an election, including on election day. So in person at your, for example, your city or township clerk. The sixth measure is that it would provide registered voters access to an absentee ballot for any reason for 40 days prior to the election. So two changes going on here. Currently, you're allowed 30 days. This would increase that amount to 40. Also, currently absentee ballots are granted only for voters who meet certain criteria such as age limits. Don't remember the exact number, but I believe you have to be over 55. Thank you. Or if you are unable to vote without assistance or a few other reasons. This would remove all of those criteria and just say, you know what, you want to vote absentee? No problem, we can vote absentee. All right. And the last measure that it puts in place is it ensures the auditing of election results. 32 states have a mandatory post-election audit right now. Michigan does not, so that's the change we're going to see in this measure. Supporters of this measure say that this measure will make sure that every eligible person can vote and that every vote will count. That it makes voting accessible, secure, and fair so that our democracy will better serve all Americans and our laws will better reflect the that everyone, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, deserves to have their vote secure and counted. And The supporters for this are members of the Promote the Vote Coalition, which includes the American Civil Liberties Union, the League of Women Voters of Michigan, the Michigan League for Public Policy, the NAACP of Detroit, the NAACP of Michigan, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long list of supporters. The opposition to this says that this proposal would undermine election integrity by removing safeguards that help prevent ineligible people from voting or casting multiple ballots. They argue that by allowing voters to register on election day, the proposal would not give clerks any time to run existing processes to verify a person's eligibility to vote. That there's the same problem with no reason absentee voting for anyone without verifying a person's identity before they're sent a ballot. Some proposals are written into law. Already some of the things that are being proposed here are written into law. Their inclusion in this proposal serves only to mislead voters about its true purpose, and that the proposal would be a disaster for election integrity. This is opposed by an organization called Protect My Vote There, an Ballot Question Committee. At this time, they do not have a website or a Facebook page or a place for them to go to get information about it. Okay, so that's that's our third and final proposal. Are there any questions about that? Yes.
I don't know if I have this exactly right, but I've heard that first-time voters who are in college away from home, that right now, being able to vote, they have to jump through a number of hoops. Like, they either have to come home, register in person, or they can change their legal address to where they're living, going to college, and then.
So the question is, what is the current obstacle for college students?
And does this proposal make it easier for first-time voters?
That's a
like
good
that?
question. So I surmise that the challenge that a college student faces here is that the first time you vote, you can either register in person and then vote absentee after that.
Oh, you can't.
Only at the Secretary of State's.
I'm going to get corrected by all the experts in this room, so I'm going to use the hive mind on this one.
Yeah.
Tell me where I'm wrong. So you can.
If you register through
register
the
to vote.
Secretary of State or the clerk's office in person, then you can use absentee ballot the first time.
Thank you.
If you have registered with someone like the League of Women Voters, a third-party group collecting signatures, the clerk's office and Secretary of State have not yet seen an ID of you, and so therefore, that first time, you cannot do absentee ballot. And the reason that they would qualify for absentee ballot is because one of the provisions is, I expect to be out of town. And since you're in school hundreds of miles away, you can safely expect to be out of town. So as long as they've registered through the Secretary of State or their clerk, then they can vote absentee.
Which, so to take that a step further, I hear that as this measure does not specifically address that. Because a voter would still need to register at the Secretary of State or with a clerk.
But this is automatically registering them at the Secretary of State.
So
Right.
any
Okay.
secretaries.
Right, and the other thing is the expect to be out of town. Let's say a student lives in Livonia and they're going to Schoolcraft, but they're also working, so they might not have time during the day to get to a polling place. They would not qualify under the current restrictions, but if it's no excuse absentee ballot, they could still do it.
So the impact to the college student then is that we have simplified the process for them of getting registered to vote in the first place, and so therefore
Then they can
yeah.
use the absentee.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Laura.
If the group is interested, the 5 reasons that you can get an absentee ballot is your age, over 60, you have an infirmity, you're going to be out of town, you're in jail, or you're working a precinct other than your own on election day.
What was the last?
And there's a religious reason. There's some people who won't go to polls, I don't know what that religious
I
reason
didn't
is,
see
but
that
that's
on
one
the
of
list.
them. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that to make sure that it was audible on video, and I may ask you to repeat some of those things. So, for anyone who's interested, the specified reasons right now for being allowed to vote absentee are over 60, not 55, which is what I said earlier. Infirm, unable to vote without assistance. In jail, out of town, and working in a precinct other than your own on election day, and religious reasons.
Are you saying that if a student is registered and they're away from where they're supposed to vote, they have to come home to vote now?
It would
They have to
depend
vote?
on how they registered to vote. So right now, if a student registered to vote by going to the Secretary of State's office or their clerk,
They're
then-
already registered. And, this is a year later and they're at college.
right, it would depend on how they registered at that time. So if they were registered by going to the Secretary of State's office when they were 18,
Yeah.
then when they started college and were away, they would be able to vote absentee, no problem. If, however, they were registered.
That's the
to
way it
vote-
is now?
That is the way it is now. However.
If it's
they
their
were-
first time voting.
If it is their first time voting, yes.
So if they voted in the primary, they're good to go for being an absentee in the general election.
If they voted in the primary, they would be able to vote absentee in the general election. However, if they registered to vote, say, at a voter registration drive that was not at the Secretary of State or a clerk, then the first time that they vote needs to be in person. So the student who lives in Livonia but is going to school in Midland is in trouble in that case because they may not easily be able to show up in Livonia.
Okay.
So that's the situation.
My wife and I, we were at Wayne State and we were signing up students. They were filling out forms so they could vote in the district where the school was at Wayne State. Then they would-
Changing their address.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I see lots of collective wisdom. I'm gonna start back here.
There's also a provision that the driver's license and where they live has to be the same right now.
Okay, so a current provision that their driver's license and their place of registration, their place of residence
Yes.
must match would also be potentially an obstacle for students voting.
Right.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what Laura was going to say.
Match the driver's license.
Okay, yes, one more.
This goes back to number 5.
Yeah.
When we, there we go.
Okay.
When we register to vote, and this perhaps relates to something else, but it's self-reporting as to citizenship and residency.
Say that again?
It's self-reporting. Yes, I am a citizen, check.
Yes,
That is correct.
that's what it is now.
Yes, I'm a resident of Livonia or Redford, whatever, check.
Well, you have to put your driver's
It's an
license number or your social number on
It's
there,
an
so the clerk's gonna
affidavit.
verify.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you register to vote, you answer 2 questions. You say, I am a U.S. citizen. I will be 18 by the time of the next election. And then you provide either a driver's license number or a social security number.
So
Last
how are
four
these
digits.
people with
Last
green
four
cards who have a driver's license able to vote?
Well, they shouldn't be.
I know.
Yeah, I do not know how a person with a driver's license and a green card would be able to register to vote.
That's up to the, that's the clerk's responsibility.
Another question on that same theme. Do you need a physician's signature that says you're infirm to, or you just, you self, it's a kind of an affidavit that you're to, whatever your medical
You have to
problem.
check a reason.
You just check it without the doctor's
So
sign.
you wouldn't have to check a reason.
Okay.
So the question is, do you need to, if you're going to argue that you are unable to vote unassisted, do you have to prove it? Do you have to have a doctor's note? No, you don't.
Nor do you have to prove that you'll be out of town.
Nor do you have to prove,
it's-
you don't need to prove any of the reasons behind, behind why you're opting to vote absentee.
The jail one will probably speak for itself.
As would the being 55. Yeah.
Well, in
Or
jail
being 60,
waiting
I'm
for
sorry.
trial.
Yes, I know.
Are there any other questions about this one? Okay. Thank you for letting me benefit from the collective wisdom in the room on some of these topics. All right, I'm going to jump back ahead. Okay. All right. So, just to wrap things up, hey, there's an election coming. You can go to vote411.org for election information and to check your registration. Absentee ballots became available on September 22nd. If you are not registered to vote, you can still register. The last day to register to vote is Tuesday, October 9th. Election day is Tuesday, November 6th. You can vote as early as 7 a.m., as late as 8 p.m. And as we mentioned, you may not vote a straight party ticket in the partisan section of your ballot. There is no straight party voting in this election. Also, remember to vote for the proposals in the nonpartisan section of your ballot. Sometimes they get a little lengthy. You have to flip them over, look for them on the back. That's where you will find them. All right. Are there any other questions before we conclude? Yes.
Not a question, but when my husband and I went down to get our absentee ballot for the last election, we could also vote or check a mark so that they would send it to us for the next election.
Okay, so once you enroll to do absentee, once you're an absentee ballot voter, you're an absentee ballot voter all the way.
Right, for the next election.
Okay, that's good to know. Yes.
For those of us who live in the Schoolcraft College district, we will have a question on the ballot regarding a millage. Where can we find information on that?
Website, Schoolcraft.
So our Vote 411, our voter information website does list at least the language of any local measures that you will vote on. You would need to seek out the supporters and the opponents on your own. Schoolcraft College, I've seen their signs around. They're marketing pretty hard for it. My guess is that you would find some good information on the website.
There's information on the Schoolcraft College website, and I think the foundation Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, but there's a lot of stuff on Facebook around it.
Yes.
Where will this be published or recorded? Where can people look this up?
So the slides that we are talking through here come from the League of Women Voters of Michigan. I don't think they are available on the League of Women Voters of Michigan website just yet, but they should be soon. The recording of my conversation, we do expect to post on our local league's website, the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. LWV Northwest. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to break.